this meeting. So this is a main share meeting. And today it's with great pleasure and much gratitude that Carol has stepped in for us. And she's come to share for about 40 minutes, after which I'll open up for general sharing, or if you'd like to ask Carol a question. Carol, thank you so much, darling. And it's wonderful to have you here, stepping in for us. And the floor is yours. Are you there, darling? Can hear you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm an alcoholic, and my name is Carol, and I'm grateful to be here. I'm at a conference this weekend, and I didn't plan on sharing. I came to hear Don, so I won't do as great a job as him, but I will do my best to share the message. Thank all of you for service. I was given the gift of sobriety in Fort Worth, Texas at the Glass House Group on May 1st, 1988, for which I'm really grateful. And the topic is character defects, which to me is step 6 and 7. You know, I ran my life the best way I knew how, and it got me to Alcoholics Anonymous in the shape it did, and that was not good. You know, I felt shame and guilt and remorse and fear and all those things, and I didn't know those words when I came here. And I was reading my big book when I was new, and I saw restless, irritable, and discontent. And that's how I felt, but I didn't know the words to put to it. Now, me living my best way I knew how got me to Alcoholics Anonymous the way it did. And I knew I needed some help in my early 20s. I knew I had a problem drinking, and I didn't start drinking till 18, but it took till I was 37 and a half to get to you. And Tuesday, I will be 73. So it took a while. But what I know is that my higher power knew someday I would make it to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I needed all those years of things that happened to me to get me to the point that I would be willing to change, because I kept thinking I could handle it, I can take care of it, you know, I could manage. By the time I was 10, I was taking care of the family and doing everything and didn't have people I could trust and rely on. So I had to do what I thought was the way to live. And you know, it got me to Alcoholics Anonymous. So, but those were my survival tools, right? Telling lies and doing the things I had to do to get what I needed. And when I came to you, you told me I had to change and I had to give those things up. And it was really hard, because that was how I lived for so long. And you wanted me to do things differently, even reading a book every day that has instructions on how to live sober and have contented sobriety, to be peaceful in my own body. See, I never had that. I remember, you know, I was a couple months sober or so, and I said to my sponsor one day, I said, life is boring. There's no chaos. There's no crisis. I have no knot in my gut anymore. And she said, do you know what that is? And I said, I have no idea. And she said, it's called serenity. See, I didn't know what serenity was. I didn't know what living without a knot in my gut was. I didn't know how to get through every day. My prayers were, get me out of this and I won't do it again. And you taught me a new way to pray. And I have a book of instruction called Alcoholics Anonymous that tells me what to do. And, you know, I was reading it this morning, and I read it pretty much every day, and I read my big book out loud. And I guess this is kind of a character defect, because see, I didn't just drink when things were tough. I drank to celebrate, right? I drank for happy occasions. Now I'm on page 88 in my big book. It tells me, you know, I have to say thy will be done and let go of my way and the way I want to do it. And then it says, I am in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. And I was realizing this morning that they put the word excitement first before fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. So that tells me probably that I am more likely to drink or be in a position of maybe wanting to if I get excited about something versus being in fear or anger or resentment or anything else. Now, when I would hear people share at a meeting, because at Glass House, they were solution-based. If we had something, like one morning they said, does anybody have a topic? And I would say fear, because I had to go face something at work and I didn't know how to do it sober and different than I ever did it. And so people would share on fear, or we would share on whatever somebody had a topic for. And I didn't want to tell you I'm going to try your way. See, I kept trying my way. And I think of it, those defects as, there was a kid's toy and it had circles and triangles and squares and all different shapes. And you had little blocks and you had to put the blocks into that little plastic thing, for coordination and everything. And I'm trying to put a square into a triangle, or I'm putting a triangle into a triangle and it's not fitting. And you said, all you have to do is turn it a little bit. Don't try forcing it. Just turn it and it'll fit real easy. So when somebody would share, this is how I made an amend, or this is how I got through something, or telling my boss, whatever it is, I wouldn't always tell you I'm going to try it. I would just try it. And then I found out, you know what, that worked. Sometimes I play tug of war with God. And I think I know better than God, or I can do it my way again. One more time, I'll try my way. One more time, it'll be different this time. And it's not, but sometimes God lets me fall place first in the mud for that lesson. And sometimes I get to land softly on a pillow. See, I don't always have to do it to force the solution. I ask God to bless it or block it and let me know the truth. About a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, thought I was going to go to Oklahoma to a conference. And I kept praying about it and asked God to bless it or block it. And God blocked it because the generator in my camper van didn't work and I had to get it fixed. Now, normally, without Alcoholics Anonymous, I would be finagling and getting all upset and trying to figure it out. And I didn't struggle. I just let go, because that's what I'm taught. And so what happened is, one of my friends from Canada came down and some other people, and I got to go to a conference in the town next to me. See, I just have to let go and God seems to work it out, right? And then somebody I sponsor in Mexico is here, and she flew in last week, and we were at a conference on the other coast of Florida last week. And now we're near where I live at another conference. Now, see, if it were up to me, I would have forced things and I would have missed all these experiences. Now, I just realized I have to let go. And when I try your way and I read the big book and I follow the instructions and I take different actions and I have to let go of what I think is an outcome, then it works just fine. And what I tell myself is, I had to let go of my character defect. It was even one about God. I thought I had a hateful, punishing God because I made those promises. I get me out of this, I won't do it again. And then more stuff had happened. So one of my defects is thinking I'm a higher power to myself, that I don't have a loving higher power. But when I read step 3, even with 35 years of sobriety, I keep seeing things differently. My big book keeps telling me that too. It says in the last couple pages of Keys to the Kingdom that I'll never outgrow this program. It allows for limitless expansion, and I don't run from responsibility. I attack things with surprising vigor. So I have to let go. And they told me some of the things that I thought were, maybe we call them character defects, but I think it's kind of my will versus God's will sometimes. They weren't bad. They were just the extent maybe I took them to. See, my big book says there's 2 sins. One is to interfere with my own growth, and one is to interfere with the growth of another. So one of mine is, I think I know what you should do and how you should do it and when you should do it and all that. But helping somebody is one thing, but doing it for them all the time and stopping them from having what God wants to happen for them is taking it a little too far. They used to say, let God or be God. And I don't want to be God anymore, because me running my life the way I thought got me to you. So what I found for me, because I had to find a higher power when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was really hard because I wouldn't even pick up a card if it said the word God on it. And then you told me that's what I have to turn my life over to. And I thought it was this punishing thing. And I found for me what over time, I try things just like I told you, I'll try what you say might work in some situation. I had to try and find this higher power. So I would try some of the things you shared. Well, some of them worked for me and some of them didn't. And so I don't like to use the word defects. It's one of the things that God put into me that I have to try to change is I don't invite God into my small, limited human day anymore. I invite myself into God's day because anything's possible in God's day. Another one is I would read things and not remember what I read because I kind of speed read. But what I found is changing little habits helps me. We read how it works at almost every meeting or the steps. And so what was happening in my early sobriety is something would be happening and I didn't know how to handle it. And I can't use my own way anymore because I know that didn't work. And so I would just do that pause because I was reading step 11 already. My sponsor had me read things in the big book early because she said, Carol, if you do the third and seventh step, it tells you what to do and who to turn things over to. And then she had me read 68 to 71 and ask God to mold my ideals and help me live up to them. How do I want to live and what kind of person do I want to be? And then she had me read steps 10 and 11 because it tells me what to watch for and it tells me what to do. And so I would also get into these situations, especially when I was new and didn't know what to do. And I would just stop for a minute and say, okay, God, let this go the way you want it to. And then I would hear somebody's voice in my head and it said, the result was no until you let go absolutely. Or you stood at a turning point, asked to let go with complete abandon. Like free fall, jump off the cliff, Carol. God's going to have it go okay. I don't have to crash. Maybe it's only a curb and it's 6 inches higher. I learned to fly. That's what I would tell myself. And so I would do these little things. And so I had to find this higher power. So my higher power is gender neutral. It's not masculine or feminine. It's changes the weather. Yesterday it was sunny and I was looking out at the ocean because our room has a view on the side of the ocean. And then a few hours later, when I looked at it, the sky was gray. I could see rain in the distance and the water wasn't calm. The ocean had white caps on it, high waves. Now, see, I have to remember there's a higher power that can do that and I can't. So I have to trust it. And what I found is by letting go of my old ideas, the way I thought things should go, life goes a whole lot better. And I just have to let go of the outcome. And I get to where I say, okay, God, however this goes, I have a lesson and an experience to grow through to share with somebody else someday, because that's what it's about for me. And sometimes I have to remember it's not about all these things happening. It's about life. It's about going through them and not thinking about drinking or not drinking. Because I can go through life that way. Those are some of the promises in our big book. The 5th step promises and the 10th step promises, people don't talk about as much. They talk about the 9th step promises a lot. But the 5th step, it says, if I do that 5th step, if I get rid of all the stuff inside that's making me feel so bad about myself, then the thought to drink doesn't come often. And that's also by letting go of the way I used to live and those character defects, the ones that I thought I knew what everybody should do and how they should do it, or how I should do it. And when I let go of all that, my life is so much better and it's so much smoother, and I'm not in collision with anybody most of the time. Most of the time I get to live in contented sobriety. And I know when I'm not. And that happens. I get into these situations sometimes. And do I always do it right? No. But it says progress, not perfection. I grew up thinking I had to be perfect. That's what my parents kept instilling. You can't make mistakes. You have to do everything exact and perfect. And I don't. Even in sobriety, I'm not. But see, I have a way to correct it when I don't, because I have a step 10 and it tells me what to watch for. It says selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. So those are pretty good character defects I have, but they're not so, I don't know what the word, they're not as glaring now. They don't pop up as often. But what I've learned is there's other things that do. And I can add other words to that. Like I get into procrastination, I get into frustration, I get into overwhelmed. Those are character defects too. Now, what do? I ask God at once to remove them. That's step 10. To me, all the steps are interconnected. It's not just one step I have to work on. If I'm doing them and they're interconnected, like step 10, I ask God to remove these things. And the solution for me for everything in my big book is that give it to God, make an amend quickly and say I was wrong if I was, and call you or talk to you or help you. We had a sobriety countdown last night at the conference. The lady, the longest sober, was 46 years. I could have been at a conference at 4 days sober. I would have been really stressed because I couldn't look you in the eye or talk to people when I was sober. I had to drink to stand at a podium for a work thing to talk and then hold on to the podium so I wasn't swaying so people wouldn't know I was drunk. Some of you might identify with things like that, right? And I can talk to people now. See, just like talking to you, I couldn't have done that before, but now I can stand in a room full of people. And it's by taking all these actions that I didn't want to take, by doing what I didn't want to do, and letting go of the old ideas of how I thought I should be and what I had to do, by trying your way. Now, I will tell you that at 4 months sober, I went to a conference. I lived in Fort Worth, and I went to a conference in Oklahoma. And I had never driven anywhere like that before. It was several hours away, and I was really scared. And I drove there, and I got there, and somebody said, you can chair a meeting. And I said, no, I'm only 4 months sober. I can't do that. And they told me I could. And then they said, what topic would you like? And I picked fear. See, I didn't realize how much fear ruled my life when I got to you. And I choose to not let it do that anymore. See, what I do is I recognize when these thoughts come that are the negative ones or the ones that said, you can't do this, or, you know, the healthy ones. There's healthy fears and unhealthy fears, right? Like if I pick up a pot from the stove, I burn myself on the oven because I don't use the long oven mitts. I use the short ones, and then my arm touches the baking pan and then I get burned. See, there's healthy fears and unhealthy fears. Now, when I met people, because my parents, I learned a lot of fear from things my parents told me. So I'm 4 months sober and I'm at this conference, and I met a lot of people from Dallas, and they said, come to Dallas to our meetings. And I said, I don't drive to Dallas. I hear the traffic report every morning, and there's a lot of bumper to bumper traffic, and I can't do that. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to drive in Dallas. So I'm coming home from the conference, and it's Labor Day weekend, which is a big holiday in the United States. I'm listening to the recordings of that conference, and I'm crying. And all I'm doing is watching the car in front of me so I don't hit the bumper of it, right? And I didn't know, because I've never driven up that way, but the interstate forked off. And I had to make a right turn to go to Fort Worth, and I was just going straight, not hitting the car in front of me. And all of a sudden I look up and I see signs that say Stemmons Freeway and Mockingbird Lane, and the roads I recognized from the traffic report in the mornings on the radio of downtown Dallas. And what happened is God said to me telepathically, Carol, you could do what you don't think you can do. Just do what's right in front of you, and you can do things that you never thought you could do. And that's been what's happened through my sobriety. I just have to do what's right in front of me. Now, I took words out of my vocabulary when I got sober, and as time goes on, they keep increasing. One of them I took out early on is should, because somebody said don't should on yourself. Like I should have done this, or maybe this talk I could have gone, I should have said that, or I shouldn't have said this. And when I told my sponsor that once, the first time I shared was 9 months sober. She said, Carol, it went, if you invited God into it, it went the way God wanted it to. Because I learned I have a very powerful God. Just like when I didn't want to do a 4-step and I kept avoiding going to my home group the night I knew they were doing a 4-step, I went to a different group and guess what they did? The 4th-step that night. So if God wants something to happen, it's going to happen, and it doesn't matter for me if I'm trying to avoid it or not. God's going to have it happen. So I have to do those things that are right in front of me. So another word I took out, like when I do my 7-step prayer, I just take, God, take all of me and give me back what you want me to keep. Because for me, they told me if it's not illegal, immoral, or unconstitutional, it's not too bad. And so I just say, okay, God, however this goes, I get a lesson, experience to grow through to share with someone else. And inviting myself into God's day, there's unlimited possibilities. If I invite God into my day right now, we're in this little motel room and I'm limited. But once I step out the door into God's world, there's unlimited possibilities that happen. Somebody came up to me and goes, you're Carol L. I see you online at meetings. We go to a lot of the same meetings together. And there's a Wednesday meeting I go to that's a women's meeting, and the gal that runs that is here. And we got to hug and be in person. And she gave me this little, it's a little glass jar with a cork in it. And it's got a little white piece of paper that's scrolled. She said, you can write a message on it. And I said, no, I'm letting God's messages just be unclear till I need to know. And there's a little mustard seed and a little amethyst chip in it. Because the mustard seed grows, and it's amazing. Like, I don't have to figure things out anymore. All I had to do is come in here and surrender the way I thought life should be and how it should go and the outcomes. And by doing that, I get to live in contented sobriety and have a peaceful day most any day. I don't get upset about things hardly ever anymore. I don't get into anger. I don't get into fear. I get into overwhelmed and procrastinate and frustrated a little bit more. But that's okay. That's a whole lot better than anger and fear and resentment, because those are what's going to take me out. But it's also excitement. And I have to let go of how I think people should do stuff and not stopping them from reaching what God wants. I try to not play tug of war with God. Now, I'll tell you, I was a year sober. And the day I turned a year sober, I had to have foot surgery. And my sponsor, who was almost 23 years sober, went in the hospital that day. She died a couple weeks later. I had to get another sponsor, which is okay. It took a while, but I got a sponsor again. Had a support group. See, I didn't want to get close to you. I didn't like women when I got sober. You were my enemies. And a lot of us felt that way, I've learned. A lot of us didn't like women. I don't know if the guys like the guys. From what I hear, that they had the same issue. So I had to let go of that and realize you ladies are saving my life. You're calling me on my stuff and you're telling me your experience. You're sharing your experience with me. You're not telling me what to do. The other words I took out of my vocabulary are good or bad. They're not good or bad things. They're lessons and experiences. Somebody planted the seed of Alcoholics Anonymous in me when I was in my early 20s. Somebody I worked with told their story in our company cafeteria, and I go, but I didn't go to jail. I didn't get a DUI. I didn't lose jobs. I didn't have consequences externally. They were internal. But God knew I was going to get to you one day, and so I had all those 16 and a half years of lessons so that I would be willing to change. If I got here earlier, I'm not sure I would have stayed. I wasn't willing enough to let go of my ideas, to be different, to work the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to get to that level of desperation that I was willing to let go of how I thought I should run life, of how I thought it should be. Now, sometimes this higher power gives me really strong lessons, and they're not always verbal. Sometimes they're just experiences I get to have. You know, I had that foot surgery, and of course I want to heal right away. God, make it go fast. But my foot hurts so bad. And it was throbbing, and I was on crutches, and I had this wood shoe. And so I told my neighbor, and she says, well, I'll take you to the store to get you out of the house. So she drives me to the store and lets me out in front of the store, and she goes to park the car, and I'm talking to this higher power that I call God. And I said, God, I don't like this. I want to throw the shoe and the crutches through the store window. I don't want my foot to hurt anymore. I'm tired of this. And it was only a couple weeks. Couldn't go see my sponsor anymore. She wasn't taking visitors in the hospital. And what God did for me is he had a lady wheel out of the store in a wheelchair. And she wheeled over to the passenger side of her car. And she opened the door and she pulled herself onto the passenger seat. And she folded up her wheelchair and put it behind her seat. And she lifted her legs into the car, closed the door, slid across to the driver's side, and drove away. And I said, okay, God, I'll walk again one day. And my foot still hurts every now and then, but you know, I don't take walking for granted. Just like if we get a cold, if I get a cold and I can't breathe and my nose is stuffy, then when it's not stuffy again, do I take breathing for granted? Sometimes. Now, when I would call my sponsor, whose name was Lois, my first sponsor was Lois, and Lois used to smoke cigarettes before I knew her, and she got emphysema, and she had a third of a lung, and she was on oxygen confined to bed the last 7 years of her life. But this higher power that loves me gave me a sponsor confined to bed so I would learn to sit still. Because one of mine defects is I don't sit still very well. I still don't sit still very well. To sit still through a whole hour meeting was not easy. But where I got sober, they said, Carol, you sit through the whole meeting and you don't get up till the end, unless it's an emergency. Get your drink of whatever you want before the meeting starts, and get to meetings early and greet people. See, one of mine is I couldn't even go to the grocery store except 7 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't look you in the eye, talk to people, or have patience stand in line anywhere. And they told me get to the meeting at least 30 minutes early, an hour early if I can, and stand at the door and greet people or make coffee. See, my first words are always out of my mouth is I can't. I don't know how. I don't know how to make coffee. I don't drink it. It's on the wall next to the coffee pot. If you follow the instructions, you can make coffee. And then they tricked me and they said, for every pot of coffee I make and every chair I set up and every person I greet, I get a day of sobriety. And I think that's how I got my first year. But I realized how important it is. You know, last weekend I was at a conference on the other coast of Florida. And my defect, you know, I don't know, I don't like that word. I called the hotel ahead of time. I said, I have a camper van. I travel around the country in my camper van when I can. And so I get to this hotel, and I'm being honest, y'all taught me honest. They said, no, you bet. We won't let you stay in the parking lot overnight in the camper. We're not covered for insurance. Now, I want to argue with them. And then my thought is, I shouldn't have told them I was going to stay in it, because if I didn't, they wouldn't have known it, and I could have stayed in the parking lot in the camper. So I said, no, it's not honest, Carol. You can't do it even if you sneak it. So I'm driving all over the town, and I find this ice cream place, and I stop for ice cream. And guess what? I'm looking out the window, and across the street, there's a big circle with a triangle in it with a big 24-hour in it. And it's an AA club. that God, where God guides, God provides. So I finish my ice cream and I go across the street and I go into this clubhouse, and they're going to be having a meeting in a half hour. And I talked to some people. Now, I told you I don't like talking to people. When I came here, I couldn't look you in the eye or talk to you. And I go to this group. And guess what? There was a handful of people, but nobody came over and said, hi, we don't know you, or welcome. And so what you taught me is it's my responsibility. So I went over to people and I said, hi, I shook my hand. I said, hi, I'm Carol and I'm visiting, and what's your name? And started talking to people. Now, that's not how I came in. That's not my nature to do that. That goes against me. I'm at this conference and I'm still wanting to isolate. What I've learned is I can be alone in a whole group of people, and I can be not alone by myself. So I have to make me do that. Just like speaking isn't natural for me. It goes against how I feel. But I know it's what God wants me to do. And if I step out of my comfort zone, God always rewards me. You know, the other day I heard somebody on step 3, and he goes, we don't turn ourselves over to God. We turn ourselves over to the care of God. And that makes a difference for me. I have to remember God cares for me. God's not punishing me when stuff happens. Now, you know, and I want to tell you the rest of the story about that meeting. As I went to the meeting, and until it started, I went up to people and I greeted them and I introduced myself to that. And then I didn't feel like I was in an AA meeting, because the person opened it, started with that he uses and he does that. And then other people start talking about therapy, and they're talking about the medicines they're on. And I thought, what is the new person going to hear to make them want to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and work this program? And when I was 4 years sober, I got a footprint story, my own personal footprint story. I was 4 years sober. It was 31 years ago, and I still have it unfolding now. And all I had to do was let go of the outcome. See, I got cancer again. I had it when I was 21. I got it again at 42 when I was 4 years sober, between those times. So when my cancer came back and I prayed, and my doctor says, Carol, I'm giving you a 99 to 1% odds we can do a reversible surgery on you. I thought that was pretty good, right? 99 to 1 odds. Now what happened is God gave me the 1%. But I got my personal footprint story through it. But it was having to let go of how I thought things should be. Now, I'll tell you, you know, what happened is I'm laying on a stretcher outside the operating room, and I'm talking to the anesthesiologist. I had shared at my group that I'm having surgery, and I was really scared because it was pretty serious, extensive surgery, that what they were going to do. Now I'm laying on that stretcher and I'm talking to the anesthesiologist, and I said, you sound very familiar. He took his cap and his mask off and he leaned down and he said, Glass House. He heard him having surgery and he got assigned to my case. I said, can we say the Serenity Prayer and invite God into the operating room? And he said, yes. And we're holding hands, and I'm laying in there all wrapped in these blankets, which I visualized was God's cocoon of healing and love. And another doctor walks by and he hears us listen, and he says, do you two know each other? And Jim says, yes, we're both sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so it goes on, and I get a 6 or so hour procedure. And when I wake up in recovery, a couple hours later, Jim's standing by my side. And I found out I got the 1% outcome. So I have a permanent ileostomy with a bag on the outside of my body, and they took out more parts of my body. I'm missing 8 internal organs in my body. And so what happens is a couple months go by and I started crying, but because I wasn't supposed to have an ileostomy. They were supposed to reverse it. And the day I was feeling sorry for myself, somebody knocked at my door. And it was the lady visiting me that had had one, and she came to give me her experience. What I've learned is Alcoholics Anonymous works because we share experience, not theory. I don't tell you what I think you should do. I tell you this is what my experience is. I had to let go of my old ideas. I had to let go of the way I think things should be and the way I used to do it, and listen to you and try your way. You know, I heard a speaker last night here, people I know drinking took them, but mine was bad enough for me to be willing to change, because the inside is what mattered. It's not the external stuff. It's the internal stuff. It's me looking myself in the mirror, because I can look me in the mirror because I don't feel the shame and the guilt anymore. That's a big thing. When I started, you know, I had a sponsor. We got through the steps quickly. As soon as I met her the first day, too, we talked about the first 3 steps. I knew my anymore. I didn't want to die anymore. And that's what I thought about. And then I would drink, and then I would get more depressed, because alcohol is a depressant. So
We can hear you, Carol L. Please
I'm
carry on.
sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry, my tablet cut off for some reason. So anyway, I was 3 months post-op, and I started crying because it's not supposed to be like this anymore. And then I had to realize it was just the way God wanted it to be. And when I get into accepting that God is very powerful, and I have to remember how God wants it to be is the best way and not my way anymore, that I don't play tug of war with God. When I got sober, my sponsor or somebody at my group, I don't remember who, they said, Carol, put a note on your mirror in the bathroom. My note is on my refrigerator. One of my UK friends sent me this because she hears me share it. And she took a picture of a sunrise over her house somewhere in the UK. Now my note says, Dear Carol, I know what I'm doing. Love God. And I have a poem on the wall in my house, in my apartment, that I've had for many decades. And it says, God has a plan for my life, and I don't need to know what it is. I need to suit up and show up and do the best I can today and leave the results to God. If anybody wants it, I can give somebody here. I think Young has my contact info. Usually it's on the screen, but I'm on a tablet. But anybody can contact me. I'll share whatever I can with you. But what I know is when I invite myself into God's state, anything's possible. And I have to listen to that intuitive thought. Not the first one, you know. Now sometimes when I was new, I had to throw out the first few thoughts because they were not anonymous. Sometimes my first few thoughts are actually decent ones. And when the stinking thinking thoughts come in, I don't let them rattle around in my head and go, that's a good idea. Because what's going to happen is I will actually take action on some of those, and I know that's not good. So what I do is I go like this, like I'm tapping water out of my ear, and I say, stinking get used to not let you sabotage my work, and I physically stay where they're not welcome. They don't come in my head. That's a blessing. Sometimes I have to write things, garbage can, or maybe make it, you know, I used to stick it at this, and then I'd forget about it. So I started with something, whatever it was happening. All right. I'm sorry for the error or the computer thing. So anyway, what I know is if I turn it over to God and just say, let it go the way God wants it to go, realize I have a lesson experience to grow through to share with someone else, let go of the way I think the outcome should go, it goes a whole lot better, you know. And if I remember that where God guides, God provides, and to listen to those intuitive thoughts. Because what I know from my experience is God doesn't ever leave me stranded. God always has it work out just the way it's supposed to. In 2017, I was in Mississippi, and I was going through this little town, and this voice said, "Stop for gas." And I go, "But I don't need gas." But it was very insistent. And I've learned to listen to those intuitive thoughts. And when I stopped for gas, what happened is the transmission in my camper van just stopped with no warning at all. There was nothing for an hour in the direction I was going. And so what happened is I called AAA, and I got towed twice to a mechanic the wrong direction for a half hour. He said, "It's going to take a week to get your transmission in, but you can plug into the side of my building so you have electricity." And across the street was a pizza place, a beauty parlor, and a grocery store. See, God didn't leave me stranded for that week. I had food, I had access to things I would need, and I didn't have to worry about it. Now, the day I got my 30-day chip, somebody asked me to read how it works. I wouldn't do it because I was so self-conscious if I stumbled over words and I made mistakes, and I thought you would make fun of me and I'd be embarrassed. But what happened that day is I learned the guilt was worse than the fear, because I didn't hear anything anybody shared at that meeting. What came to my mind is the responsibility statement. I think you call it the pledge. Because when I walked into Glass House, it was a big sign. It was the first thing I saw. And sitting in that meeting that day, instead of being proud for having 30 days without a drink, the thought that came to me is, Carol, if everybody said no to a request from Alcoholics Anonymous, there would not have been a meeting for me to sit in. So I made a decision that day to never say no to an AA request, to suit up and show up and do what is asked of me for Alcoholics Anonymous. And I am so honored and blessed to be here. Thank you for letting me share. I hope I shared something that helped you. And you know, I used to say you can borrow my higher power if you don't have one. But then I realized one day if I let you borrow something, it means I don't have it anymore. So you can't borrow my higher power, but my higher power is so big, I'll share it with you. So thank you again, and I'm so honored to be here. I'm going to